They thought it was just a lunch. Nothing fancy. No special occasion. Just a simple invite from their estranged daughter, whom they hadn't seen in nearly 3 years. I made the message brief, polite, emotionless. Hey, I'll be in town Sunday. Want to grab lunch? My treat. Address below. Noon. I chose my words carefully, just vague enough to spark curiosity, just neutral enough to seem harmless. No anger, no warmth, just a placeholder, like I had become to them. They said yes within minutes. And at exactly 11:58 a.m. that Sunday, I stood backstage at the Austin Convention Center, watching the crowd shuffle into their seats. The house lights dimmed slightly as the host tapped the mic. My name lit up across a massive digital screen. Aria Kale, keynote speaker, the power of walking away. And then I saw them. My mother, Marla. Hair perfect, lips tight, posture sharper than her judgment. My father, Harlan. Slightly hunched, eyes scanning the room like he wasn't sure what they'd walked into. And Reed, my golden boy brother, trailing behind them, tugging at his blazer like the rules of reality had just shifted. They weren't smiling anymore. They were confused, then startled, then silent. As I stepped onto the stage, in heels they told me I was too clumsy to walk in, wearing a tailored white suit I paid for with money I earned on my own terms. I looked directly at them, and I smiled. But this smile wasn't for them. It was for the version of me they tried to erase. Let me back up. 3 years ago they told me I was a disappointment, their exact word. Not in anger, not even in a moment of conflict. No, it was quieter than that. More cruel. My mother said it over dinner like she was commenting on the weather. Honestly, Aria, we just expected more from you. Reed is a VP at 28, and you're still selling whatever it is online. It's disappointing, sweetheart. And my father just kept chewing. Reed smirked. I nodded. I went home that night and cried until I threw up. You see, I never went to college. Not because I couldn't, I got in. But I had this wild, stubborn belief that I could build something on my own. I didn't want a degree just to hang on a wall. I wanted a life I built from scratch. But to them, that choice made me a joke. To them, if you weren't following the path they approved, you were failing. So for years, they dismissed me, ignored my business, made jokes about freelance freeloaders at parties, stopped inviting me to holidays, said they were giving me space. But what they meant was, I no longer fit their definition of success. They didn't know that in the background I was building something real. They didn't know about the women I coached, the companies I helped launch, the audience I was slowly gathering, people who saw me, people who listened. But that Sunday, at that lunch, they finally saw. They saw the hundreds of people standing and clapping. They saw my name lit up in lights. They saw that their disappointment had become a leader. I didn't invite them to lunch because I wanted revenge. I wasn't interested in proving anything to them. I invited them because I wanted that girl, the one they broke, to stand in front of them fully whole. I wanted her to see herself through her own eyes, not theirs. And when I opened my keynote, the first thing I said was this: sometimes the people who taught you to walk are the ones who shame you for the path you choose. But that's okay, because some journeys you're meant to walk alone. The room held its breath, including them, and that was just the beginning. I was born into a family that didn't believe in dreams. They believed in plans. Neat, structured, predictable plans, preferably with a degree, a title, and a 5-year trajectory. My name is Aria Kyle, and I grew up in a middle-class home just outside Waco, Texas. Our lawn was always trimmed, our family photos perfectly coordinated in pastel colors, and our dinners always polite, until I started asking questions. From the outside, we looked put together, but behind the curtain, everything was conditional. My mother, Marla, ran our household like a CEO without a board. She believed her children were projects to manage. Her love wasn't warm. It was transactional. If you performed well, if you made her look good, she gave you praise. If not, you were quietly punished. Cold shoulders, passive comments, Silence that lasted days. My father, Harlan, wasn't cruel. He was just absent. Not physically. He was there, in the room, in the chair, reading the paper, but never truly present. His method of parenting was agreeing with Marla and keeping peace at all costs, even if that meant watching me get emotionally gutted at dinner and saying nothing. Then there was Reed, my older brother, the crown jewel, the golden child, straight A student, varsity everything, Ivy League scholarship, corporate job at 24. He was everything they could brag about, and everything I was not. I, on the other hand, was the artsy one. The girl with paint on her jeans and notebooks full of startup ideas. I loved creating things, stories, sketches, digital designs. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't angry. I just didn't want to live someone else's version of success. When college applications rolled around, I didn't fill mine out until the night before they were due. Not because I didn't care, but because I felt like I was applying to prison. I got into 3 decent schools. One of them even offered a partial scholarship. But deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't want to go. I wanted to build something of my own. A small business, a creative studio, a space where I didn't have to ask for permission to dream. When I told my parents, they were stunned. My mother blinked twice like she didn't understand the words. "You're not going to college?" she asked. "Not right now," I replied. "I want to try launching my online business first." She scoffed. Actually scoffed. "You're going to throw your future away to play entrepreneur?" My father didn't say anything. Reed? He just grinned like he couldn't wait to tell his coworkers about the family dropout. That night I heard them whispering in the kitchen. "She's ruining her life. We'll give her a year. She'll come crawling back." They didn't know that rejection would light a fire in me. But it still hurt, because deep down I wanted someone to say, "I believe in you." I didn't need applause. I just needed one person to see me, to really see me. And for a while, that person was Gramps Theo, my mother's father. He was quiet, old school, and gentle in ways my parents weren't. He used to tell me, "Arya, you've got a compass in your chest. Don't trade that for anyone else's map." I clung to those words. Gramps was the only one who ever asked me about my projects. The only one who looked at my messy desk and said, "Looks like a mind on fire." But then he passed away. I was 23, and after that, it felt like the last light in the house went out. So I moved out, got a tiny studio apartment above a bakery, worked freelance jobs to pay the rent, started small, logo designs, website builds. Each dollar felt like a victory. Each client, a lifeline. But every time I saw my family, on the rare occasions I was invited, they made sure I knew I didn't belong. Reed would drop phrases like corporate ladder, and my mother would ask, "So are you still doing your little art thing?" I was surviving. I was growing. But to them, I was just failing with flair. Still, I kept showing up, kept trying to prove that I was worthy of love, even if I wasn't following the blueprint. I didn't know it then, but that chase would nearly destroy me. Most people think dysfunction looks like screaming matches, broken plates, or slammed doors. But in my family, it was colder than that. It was the absence of warmth, the carefully measured silences, the way love was dangled in front of you like a reward for good behavior, then snatched away the moment you stepped out of line. In our house, everything was about appearances. You didn't talk about feelings. You presented yourself. Clean clothes, polite smile, scripted answers. And the script always ended with Reed. He was the benchmark, the golden standard, the ideal Kale child. When Reed got accepted into Princeton, my mom threw a party so big it made the local newspaper. When I taught myself graphic design and launched my first website, she didn't even share the link. If Reed got a B+, it was just a hiccup. If I got an A-, it was, "Are you distracted? What's going on with you?" My achievements were filtered through a lens of suspicion. If I succeeded, it was luck. If I failed, it was proof. I wasn't rebellious. I wasn't a troublemaker. I was just different. Creative, curious, messy, maybe, but full of ideas. And that scared them. They didn't know what to do with a daughter who couldn't be managed. So they tried to mold me into Reed, or at least into someone quieter. When I was 16, I entered a statewide art competition. I spent weeks on my piece, a collage of women breaking through concrete walls. It won first place. When I told my mom, she barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice. Did you get any money for it?" That night, I overheard her on the phone with my aunt. "She's getting a little dramatic with all this girl power nonsense. I just hope it's a phase." It wasn't a phase. It was the beginning of me realizing that love, in our house, was conditional. As long as I stayed quiet, agreeable, and hungry for their approval, they gave me scraps of affection. But the moment I asserted myself, challenged an opinion, skipped a family function, said no to their plan for me, the temperature dropped. There was no shouting, just that unbearable quiet, like I had committed some unspeakable sin by existing outside their image. Even when I lived on my own, the dynamic followed me. Family group chats I wasn't added to, Reed's wedding invitation arriving with +1, to be determined, when I'd been dating someone for over a year, holidays where my name wasn't even mentioned. It was like I was being slowly erased, and yet I kept trying. Because deep down, there's this primal part of you that wants your parents to see you, to notice when you're hurting, to say they're proud of you just once, without a qualifier. But that never came. Instead, I was told, "You always have to make things complicated. You take everything so personally. You're too sensitive. You're not like Reed." And Reed? He wasn't malicious. He was just indifferent. He enjoyed the spotlight, the praise, the power. He once told me, "You know you make things harder for yourself, right?" As if choosing my own path was some kind of moral flaw. Even my extended family started to mirror my parents' tone. Uncle Tom used to greet me with, "Still doing your computer thing?" And every Thanksgiving, my aunt would say, "We're praying you go back to school someday." Like my life was a detour, a mistake waiting to be corrected. What they didn't know, what they never saw, was that I was already working harder than I ever had, building a business from nothing, balancing freelance gigs and ramen dinners, creating systems, marketing plans, support networks. But because there wasn't a diploma on the wall or a salary attached to a nameplate, to them it wasn't real. To them, I wasn't real. Just a disappointing story they didn't want to tell at parties. And it was only going to get worse. Because the deeper I leaned into my own life, the more they pulled away. Until one day, they stopped pretending altogether. The breaking point didn't come in a fight. It came quietly, in a truth that fell out of someone's mouth like it meant nothing. But it meant everything. It started with a family reunion, the first one I'd been invited to in over a year. I remember hesitating before RSVPing, but part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, something had shifted. Maybe they were finally ready to see me, not as a problem to fix, but as a person worth knowing. I brought a bottle of wine and wore a blouse my friend Nina said made me look dangerously successful. I wasn't trying to prove anything, just trying not to shrink anymore. The house was full. Reed and his wife had flown in from the East Coast. My mom had pulled out the good dishes. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filled the air. It felt familiar and foreign at the same time. And then, the speech. Because of course there was a speech. Mom clinked her glass and stood to deliver what she called a toast to the future of our family. She launched into praise for Reed, his new title, his move into corporate leadership, how proud they were. She ended with, "It's not every day your son becomes a vice president before 30. We just feel so blessed to see all our hard work pay off." People clapped, some even stood. Then she looked at me. No smile, no warmth, just this rehearsed little grin. And of course Arya's still pursuing her online thing, creative as always. We love that for her. I felt the room go cold. My throat tightened, but I didn't flinch. I just smiled, that dead kind of smile you give when you realize there's nothing left to explain. I stayed for dinner, ate in silence, avoided eye contact with everyone except the dog. But the real moment came later. In the kitchen, dishes clinking, laughter fading. I was helping clear plates when my cousin's wife, Leah, leaned in and whispered something I'll never forget. "You know, I always thought it was weird they didn't tell you about the scholarship." I blinked. "What scholarship?" "Your art school one? Mom said you got into that design program in Chicago?" "I never applied to a school in Chicago." "Oh, well, Aunt Marla said you did, and that you didn't want to go." My heart stopped. Later that night, I tore through my emails. Old folders, college stuff. I found it, an unopened email from the Bridge Institute of Design, dated over 4 years ago. Full acceptance, partial merit scholarship. A personal note from the admissions officer saying my portfolio showed unusual promise. I had never seen it before. I called the school the next day, pretending to be my high school counselor. The woman on the phone confirmed it. The mailed offer packet had been sent to my home address. A response had never been returned. The offer had expired. My hands went numb. They had thrown it away. They had thrown away my future. And when I confronted my mom on the phone, she didn't even deny it. She just sighed and said, "We didn't think it was the right fit. You were too emotional back then. We didn't want to encourage a fantasy." A fantasy. That's what my dream was to her. A fantasy. Not a path. Not a plan. Not even a possibility. She had stolen that decision from me and wrapped it in fake concern. I didn't even cry. Not right away. Instead, I felt something deeper. Rage. But not the kind you scream with. The kind that settles in your bones. That burns slow. The kind that changes people. I hung up without another word. And that night, something broke inside me. Not the dream. Not the hope. It was the belief that I needed them to see me in order to matter. They had made a choice. Now I was making mine. The night I found out about the scholarship they buried, the future they silently erased, I didn't scream. I didn't call a friend. I didn't punch a pillow. I didn't even cry. I just sat on the kitchen floor of my apartment, legs crossed like a child, staring at my laptop screen while the cursor blinked inside that unopened email like it was mocking me. 4 years earlier, someone had seen my work. Someone I didn't even know. A stranger in admissions had looked at my portfolio and said, "This girl has potential." And my own parents had hidden it. It wasn't just the lost opportunity. It was the choice they made for me. The quiet, calculated decision to clip my wings without ever saying a word. To deny me something. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they didn't believe in me. Or worse, they didn't want me to believe in myself. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I laid on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon I never signed up for. I felt like I was mourning someone. Something. It took me a while to realize what it was. I was mourning the version of me that trusted them. That little girl who used to run into the kitchen with drawings and say, "Look what I made." The teenager who held on to Gramps Theo's words like they were armor. The young woman who still showed up at Thanksgiving, hoping for a nod of approval. She was gone. And in her place was a woman who finally saw the truth, clear as glass. I was never going to be enough for them, not unless I became someone else. And the cost of becoming someone else was far too high. The next few days felt like walking underwater. Everything moved slower. Sounds were muffled. I answered work emails, finished a design project, smiled on Zoom calls. But inside, I was splitting apart. I tried to talk to my dad. I called him, thinking maybe, just maybe, he didn't know. That maybe this was something my mom had done alone. He answered on the third ring. I asked gently, carefully, "Did you know I got into the Bridge Institute, the art school in Chicago?" There was a pause, a long, loaded pause. Then he said, "Your mom and I didn't think it was a good idea. We didn't want to encourage something unstable." Unstable, like dreaming was dangerous, like being an artist was some kind of illness. I thanked him for his honesty. Then I hung up, and I blocked his number. That night I cried, hard, for the girl who could have lived in Chicago, for the friends I never met, the mentors I never had, the classes I never took, the apartment I never decorated, the stories I never got to write in that chapter. Grief has a strange way of making you feel like a ghost in your own life, like you're haunting the life you could have had. I didn't go outside for 2 days, didn't answer texts, barely spoke to anyone except my cat and the ceiling fan. But somewhere in that darkness, in the silence I used to fear, something started to shift. Not all at once. It didn't feel empowering at first. It felt hollow, heavy, like picking up a sword you didn't ask to wield. But there was this tiny, stubborn ember inside me. A voice I hadn't heard in years. It whispered, "This is where you stop asking for permission." And for the first time in my life, I listened. I stopped begging to be included. Stopped trying to earn love I had to bleed for. Stopped twisting myself into something easier to digest. Because now I knew the truth. If their love had conditions, it wasn't love. And I didn't need it anymore. I wasn't okay yet, but I wasn't broken either. I was awake. And that was the beginning of everything. The funny thing about rock bottom? It's quiet. There's no applause, no final blow, no dramatic music. It's just the moment you realize no one is coming to save you. And you finally stop waiting. After those first few days of silence, of grief and exhaustion, and staring at my own ceiling fan like it held the answers, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the mirror, not to fix my hair, not to check my face before a call. I just looked. Really looked. I didn't see a disappointment. I saw a woman who had survived being emotionally starved for years and still had love in her heart. I saw someone who had been told she wasn't serious, wasn't enough, wasn't capable, and still kept building something from nothing. I saw a version of myself they had tried to bury, still breathing. That was the day I started taking myself seriously, not as a reaction, not to prove anything to them, but because I finally believed I deserved more. I started small, with habits, routines, boundaries. I deleted the family group chat for good. I stopped following Reed on social media. I unfollowed every boss babe influencer who made me feel like I was 5 years behind just because I didn't have a 6-figure launch by Tuesday. And I booked my first session with a therapist, a woman named Tasha, who listened to my story and said one sentence that rewired something in my brain. "You were trained to think survival was love. It wasn't." From that moment, I began to unlearn everything. I stopped chasing perfection, stopped apologizing for my ambition, stopped asking small questions in big rooms. I dug into books, podcasts, courses, therapy. I started journaling again, not for content, but for clarity. I began to see patterns I had missed before. How I always second-guessed myself after phone calls with my mom. How I over-explained everything because I grew up not being believed. How I clung to friendships that mirrored my family dynamics because chaos felt like home. One night, I wrote something in my journal that I ended up taping above my desk. "Your worth is not up for debate, especially not with people who benefit from your doubt." That sentence changed how I moved. It didn't happen overnight, but piece by piece I began to build a new version of Arya. She wasn't louder or meaner. She wasn't flashy or cold. She was clear. Clear about her boundaries. Clear about her purpose. Clear about what she would no longer tolerate from anyone. I restructured my business, tightened my offers, doubled my prices, started treating myself like the CEO I actually was, not the lost girl they used to label. And clients responded. Not because I was suddenly better, but because I was finally showing up like I believed in my own value. For the first time, I wasn't chasing success to prove them wrong. I was chasing freedom to prove me right. I stopped needing them to see me. I started seeing myself. And slowly, I realized I hadn't been walking alone all this time. There were people around me who did see me. Nina, my best friend, who stayed up with me while I rebranded my site from scratch. Malik, who cooked for me when I forgot to eat and never once made me feel small. Even the clients who emailed me months later just to say, "You changed my life." All of them were reflections of a truth I had buried for years. I am not too much. I was never not enough. I am exactly who I was meant to be. And the more I stepped into that, the more unstoppable I became. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. I wasn't burning the old bridge to spite them. I was building a new one, and it only led forward. When I was a child, resistance looked like raising my voice. As an adult, I learned that sometimes the most powerful form of resistance is silence. Not the kind they used, cold and punishing, but the kind that creates space, distance, boundaries, breath. After I started healing, I didn't wake up one morning and cut everyone off. I didn't write a dramatic goodbye letter or post a takedown online. That's not who I am. Instead, I became strategic. The first thing I did was go no contact with my mother. I didn't announce it. I just stopped responding. No more short replies. No more answering out of guilt. No more emotional gymnastics trying to say the right thing that would finally make her stop being cruel. I blocked her number. I archived our emails. I removed her name from my emergency contacts. It felt strange at first, like severing a lifeline you've outgrown. But it wasn't a lifeline. It was a leash. I didn't stop there. My father reached out a few weeks later, sent me a voicemail, quiet, measured, careful. "We're just wondering what's going on. Call us back when you can. We love you." But love without accountability isn't love. And wondering what's going on after decades of subtle sabotage? That's not confusion. That's denial. I didn't respond. Reed sent a text a month later. "You good?" That was it. No punctuation, no curiosity. Just the bare minimum that he could screen capture later to show he tried. I left it on red. Instead, I poured my energy into building my world. I sat down with my journal and created what I called the Freedom Plan. Not just a business strategy, but a full life restructuring. I mapped out my ideal client, women who'd been silenced like I had. My messaging, bold, honest, no buzzwords. My offers, practical, transformational, and priced for my worth. My future team, people who valued collaboration over hierarchy. Then I implemented it, piece by piece. I rebranded my website with unapologetic language. I rewrote my bio. It no longer mentioned my family at all. I changed my business name from AK Creative Studio to Unquiet because I wasn't quiet anymore. Not about my value, not about my story, not about what I survived. As my business grew, so did my circle. I joined a mastermind group of female founders, some with degrees, many without, all with fire in their eyes. I finally hired an assistant, someone who respected my boundaries and actually read emails before forwarding them to me in a panic. And I started speaking, not just on Zoom panels, on stages, in rooms full of hundreds. And with each step forward, I made fewer excuses. When people asked why I didn't visit family anymore, I said, "I protect my peace. That comes first." When people asked what it was like growing up with a perfect brother, I said, "He wasn't perfect. He just played the game. I quit the game." That quiet confidence, it scared the people who once controlled me, and I knew it was working when the guilt started rolling in. Emails from my mom's friends. "She talks about you a lot. Maybe just reach out." Cards from relatives with underlined Bible verses about forgiveness. A passive Facebook comment from my dad under an old photo. Families go through tough times, but love is forever. But I didn't need guilt disguised as concern. I needed boundaries. And that's what I built. One quiet act at a time. No screaming. No dramatic exits. Just decisions. Firm ones. Quiet ones. Unshakable ones. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box. I removed family from my mailing list. I took back everything that belonged to me, my time, my voice, my direction. And the thing about quiet resistance? It creates a roar of its own. By the time they realized I was gone, I was too far ahead to look back. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity, out of peace, out of finally understanding that the people who love you don't ask you to shrink. They ask how they can help you grow. And anyone else? They don't get a seat at the table I built. It started with a single sentence. One line in an email I sent months after I'd last spoken to any of them. Hey, I'll be in town Sunday. Want to grab lunch? My treat. Address below. Noon. No explanation. No emojis. Just facts. I didn't expect a response, but they replied almost immediately. We'll be there. Glad to hear from you. I stared at those words for a long time. Not because they meant something, but because I had finally stopped needing them to. They thought I was extending an olive branch. They thought I was coming back. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to ask for help. Maybe to finally grow up. But I wasn't coming back. I was stepping forward, into the life they never thought I could build. I chose the venue carefully. The Austin Convention Center. I was the keynote speaker for a national women's leadership conference. Over 500 attendees, entrepreneurs, creatives, CEOs, people who paid to hear my story, not because of who my family was, but because of who I had become. My talk was scheduled for 12:10 p.m. sharp. They arrived at 11:59. I watched from backstage as they walked in, Marla, Harlan, and Reed, dressed as if they were attending brunch at the country club. My mother's heels clicked against the tile floor with calculated precision. My father looked around, clearly puzzled. Reed was texting. They reached the front desk. The greeter smiled. You're here for the keynote, right? Go ahead, front row's been reserved. They didn't know the speaker was me. Not yet. They followed the usher, confused, but silent. And when the lights dimmed, I stepped out from the wings. A spotlight snapped on. My name lit up across a massive digital backdrop. Aria Kyle, keynote speaker, the power of walking away. The room erupted in applause, and in the front row, their faces froze. My mother's expression flickered between confusion and horror. My father blinked like he was waking from a dream. Reed sat back, arms crossed, jaw locked, and I smiled. Not a smug smile, not a vengeful one, a peaceful one. The kind of smile you wear when you know exactly who you are, and you no longer need anyone else to validate it. I stood at the mic and opened my keynote. I want to start by telling you something no one told me when I was 18. You are allowed to walk away from people who only love you when you fit their idea of who you should be. The room went still. I scanned the crowd, not lingering too long on any one face, not even theirs. Because this wasn't about them. This was about me. About every person who had ever been made to feel small, silly, or insufficient for dreaming differently. I spoke for 30 minutes about toxic expectations, conditional love, and reclaiming your identity. About the pain of being erased by your own family and the courage it takes to rewrite your story. I told the audience about the rejection, the silence, the gaslighting, not naming names, but leaving no doubt who I meant. And I ended with this. Sometimes the hardest truth is realizing that the people who raised you can't see the person you've become. Not because you're invisible, but because they're still looking for the version of you they could control. And if that's the cost of your freedom, then walk. Walk tall. Walk proud. Walk away. Because there's a whole world waiting for the person you really are. The audience stood. A full standing ovation. And in the front row, Marla, Harlan, and Reed didn't move. They didn't clap. They didn't smile. They just sat there, small, stunned, silent. Exactly how I had felt for years. After the talk, I exited stage left. I didn't wait to see if they'd try to speak to me. They didn't, and I didn't need them to. That was the moment. The confrontation without a single argument. The truth, spoken loud and clear, to a room full of people who did listen. I didn't get revenge that day. I got clarity. I got closure. And most importantly, I got to watch the people who called me a disappointment finally see the woman I became and realize they had absolutely nothing to do with her. After I stepped off that stage, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't go looking for them. I walked calmly to the green room, accepted a bottle of water from the event coordinator, and sat down in the chair reserved for the keynote. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not the tense, bracing kind. The real kind. The kind that happens when the storm is finally behind you and you're standing in the quiet, knowing you made it through. The next few hours were a blur of handshakes, hugs, and women thanking me for saying the thing they hadn't yet had the courage to say. I've been trying to leave a toxic family dynamic for years. You helped me see it clearly. My mom always told me I was dramatic. I didn't know that was emotional manipulation until today. That line about walking away with your head high, I needed that. More than you know. Every thank you added another stone to the foundation I had built beneath myself. But it wasn't until the post-event photo session that the real moment happened. The organizers had asked if I'd be willing to share something symbolic from my personal journey, something visual they could post on their social feed as part of their Leaders Who Changed series. I hadn't planned for this, but without thinking, I reached into my tote bag and pulled out an old photo. A small, square, dog-eared snapshot of me at age 10, standing next to Gramps Theo, both of us holding paintbrushes, covered in color, beaming. I held it up. This is the first person who believed in me, I said. Before degrees, before websites, before the world told me I was a disappointment. He told me I was an artist. They took the photo, the snapshot, and me, all framed together under a soft light, and that image went viral. Not because of the likes, but because something about it told a story without needing to explain it. Poetic justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just that picture of a girl everyone gave up on, standing next to the one person who never did. The photo caption read, Aria Kyle, founder of Unquiet, speaker, creator. He believed in me before I did. Now I carry him with me, every time I speak. That moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about rubbing anything in. It was about letting the right people see me, on my terms. And it worked. Within days, my inbox flooded. Women who had watched the keynote online, brands asking to collaborate, a TEDx invite, podcast features, panel requests. But the most surreal thing? I got an email from the Bridge Institute of Design, the art school I was accepted to years ago, the one my parents buried. They had seen the photo and the talk. The subject line was simple. We remember you. They invited me to speak at their next incoming student orientation. Not as a regret, not as an almost, but as an example of what can happen when you don't need permission to succeed. And that was it. The circle completed. The school they stole from me invited me back. Not as a student, as a teacher. I wasn't the girl they silenced anymore. I was the woman who made a platform out of her pain and passed the mic to others who had been silenced too. And just to make sure that moment lived somewhere beyond the applause, I framed the snapshot of me and Gramps and placed it in my office. Right next to a plaque that reads, You don't need their approval. You need your voice. It was never about proving them wrong. It was always about becoming someone right, for me. And in that moment I realized I didn't win. I arrived. For years I believed the lie that blood is thicker than love. That family was who raised you, not who chose you. That if your mother, your father, or your brother couldn't see your worth, maybe it meant you didn't have any. But healing has a funny way of cracking open truth in places you never thought to look. Because after the confrontation, after the stage, after the spotlight dimmed, I realized something life-changing. I had never been alone. The people who saw me, the ones who believed in me without condition, they had been there all along. Quiet, patient, unwavering. And the first person who hugged me after that keynote wasn't a blood relative. It was Nina, my best friend since community college, and the first person outside my family who ever said, You're not too intense, you're just passionate, that's your power. Nina had sat with me on the floor of my apartment when I couldn't speak. She edited my first sales page when I thought my work was garbage. She bought me groceries when my clients ghosted me one Christmas and I had $12 in my account. But more than anything, Nina never flinched when I was messy. She held space for the tears, the rage, the awkward in-between stages of becoming. She was the sister I didn't grow up with, but the one I got to choose. Then there was Malik. We met through a client referral. He was a copywriter, I was a designer. Our projects overlapped, our music taste matched, and eventually our entire lives blended like it was meant to be. Malik never asked me to tone it down. When I told him about my family, about the email, about the conference, he didn't say, "Are you sure this isn't too much?" He said, "Do it. Let them hear your voice the way I do, clear, steady, impossible to ignore." The morning of the event, he left a note in my bag that said, "Speak like you already won, because you have. I'll be in the front row, every time." And he was. Later that night, when I collapsed into bed from the adrenaline crash, Malik didn't ask for a recap. He just took my shoes off, handed me a bowl of noodles, and said, "You crushed it." That's the thing about real support. It doesn't demand a performance. It meets you where you are. But it wasn't just Nina and Malik. It was my therapist, Tasha, who helped me unlearn the way I apologized for taking up space. It was my virtual assistant, Emmy, who once texted me, "Just a reminder, you are not your family's mirror. You are your own light." It was the community of women I'd coached, the very ones I thought I was helping, who began sending me emails like, "Your boundaries gave me the courage to walk away from my own abusive mom. Watching you speak helped me file for divorce. You're the reason I launched my first business after 15 years of being told I wasn't ready." It was these people who made me realize family isn't who you come from, it's who you come alive with. And the deeper I leaned into these relationships, the safe ones, the kind ones, the real ones, the more I understood that my story wasn't tragic. It was reborn. Because when the people who raised you reject your truth, it's easy to believe the lie that no one else will care either. But there are people out there who will love you not despite your truth, but because of it. And those people? They don't need blood ties or shared last names to love you in full. They need only one thing, that you let them in. And I did, piece by piece, day by day, until I realized that the most powerful form of healing isn't success. It's being seen and loved, exactly as you are. I didn't rebuild alone. I rebuilt with, and that made all the difference. The thing about pretending for so long is that eventually the mask starts to slip. And when it does, especially in public, people notice. After the conference, after my keynote went viral, something strange happened. People started reaching out to them. Not me. Them, extended family, old church friends, neighbors from our childhood block. Even a few of Reed's former classmates who had stumbled across the video. They all had the same reaction. "Wait, is that Arya? Why didn't we know she was doing all this? I thought she was struggling." It didn't take long before the illusion cracked. Because for years my family had worked hard to control the narrative. At holidays, they told people I was trying to find herself. At church, they said I had gone off track. To relatives, they used words like directionless, dramatic, difficult. So when people saw me on stage, collected, composed, successful, it didn't match the version they had been fed. And suddenly, people started asking questions. My aunt called me, the one who once said, "We're praying you go back to school someday." This time she said, "Why didn't anyone tell us you were speaking at that conference?" I was shocked. Shocked. Because they were only ever told one version of me, the one that served their superiority. And now, the truth was louder. The family group chat lit up. Yes, the one I had long since left. Cousins were posting clips from the conference. One of my uncles commented under a LinkedIn post about my keynote, "Arya's always been brilliant, just misunderstood." Oh, now I was brilliant? It was like they were all scrambling to realign themselves, to rewrite their parts in my story now that they couldn't deny its success. But the most unexpected moment of exposure didn't come from a comment. It came from a screenshot. Someone, I still don't know who, dug up an old Facebook post from my mom's profile, dated 5 years ago. A photo of Reed with the caption, "One child makes us proud every day. The other is still chasing dreams online. Pray for her." It was petty, passive-aggressive, dismissive, and now it was public. The screenshot made its way around certain circles. People were tagging it under my conference clips. Suddenly, people weren't just inspired by me. They were angry for me. Bloggers wrote think pieces. Commenters said things like, "No wonder she walked away." This is exactly the kind of subtle cruelty people never talk about. That post is emotional abuse in a font. I didn't share it. I didn't engage. I didn't need to. Because the people who had defended my parents for years were now watching their words unravel the narrative they had written. And Reed? He tried to play neutral. He posted a photo of us as kids, no caption, hoping, I think, to look like the supportive big brother all along. I didn't respond, because now that I had a platform of my own, I didn't need to clarify anything. The silence spoke for itself. The more they scrambled to reclaim control of the story, the more obvious it became that they had never supported me, and everyone could see it now. Some relatives reached out to apologize. Others stayed quiet, probably out of shame. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being asked to explain myself. They were, and they had no explanation. Because while they were trying to protect their image, I was busy building my reality. One built on truth. One built on earned trust and community and unshakable self-worth. They had spent years convincing people I was broken. And now those same people were looking at me and realizing I was never broken. I was buried, and I dug myself out. No drama, no spectacle, just a quiet, undeniable truth that made their story collapse under its own weight. Let them explain it now. I used to think closure came from conversation. That one day my mom would sit me down, apologize for the manipulation, the shame, the condescension, and mean it. That my dad would look me in the eye and say, "I should have protected you." That Reed would admit he saw it all and just didn't care to intervene. I imagined those scenes like a movie in my head, complete with teary eyes and group hugs and maybe, just maybe, healing. But healing didn't come in those conversations. It came in the silence I chose after I stopped needing them. I didn't get closure from them. I gave it to myself, one boundary at a time. After the dust settled from the exposure, after the calls, the emails, the awkward apologies from people who once laughed behind their hands, I had a decision to make. Would I reopen the door? I sat with that question longer than I expected, because forgiveness is complicated when the hurt isn't just one big wound. It's 1,000 little ones. It's not one slap. It's a decade of slights. Not a punch, but the slow, daily erosion of your spirit by people who were supposed to protect it. And so, I made a choice. Forgiveness? Yes. Reconnection? Number not, in the way they wanted. Not with holiday invites or weekly calls or pretending the past never happened. I forgave them for not being the parents I needed. I forgave Reed for enjoying his pedestal. But I did not forget. And I did not re-enter the system that broke me. Instead, I wrote down 3 promises to myself, the moral code I would live by from here on out. 1. I will never shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone again. If my presence challenges them, let it. If my success unsettles them, that's theirs to carry. I will not dim myself for anyone, especially not for people who only ever saw me as too much. 2. I define my value. No one else gets that power. Not clients, not followers, not parents, not partners. I don't need a degree to be valid. I don't need applause to be worthy. My work, my voice, my story. They matter because I say they do. 3. Peace is the priority. Always. If it costs me my peace, it's too expensive. If it chips away at my confidence, it doesn't belong in my life. If it feels like walking on eggshells, I'm not walking in. With these promises in place, I finally understood something simple and powerful. I'm not running anymore. I'm choosing. I'm not making decisions from trauma. I'm making them from clarity. And clarity told me this: the people who need to control your story will always feel threatened by your freedom. Let them. Because I'm no longer their project, no longer their mirror, no longer the daughter they get to parade when convenient and silence when inconvenient. I'm Arya Kyle, a speaker, a founder, a builder, a woman with an open heart and a closed door to the past. And here's the thing: I didn't become this version of myself in spite of them. I became her because I finally stopped asking them for permission. I stopped letting their silence write my worth. I stopped mistaking shame for guidance. I stopped mistaking proximity for love. They gave me life, yes, but I gave myself freedom, and that matters more than approval ever did. I don't hate them. I don't need them to change. I just no longer bend myself to make them comfortable. That is my moral resolution. I will protect my voice. I will protect my joy. And I will never again hand over the pen when I'm the author of this life. Healing doesn't end with a mic drop or a standing ovation. It continues in the quiet, ordinary moments, the ones no one claps for. Like making your morning coffee without dread in your chest, or writing a business email without second-guessing every word, or spending time with people who make you feel seen, not small. After I cut ties with the people who clipped my wings, I didn't just walk away from a toxic past. I walked toward a future I designed with intention, brick by brick, on my terms. And here's what that future looks like now. I run a business I love, without shame. Unquiet, the creative agency I rebranded during my healing phase, now serves over 200 women-led startups every year. We don't just build brands, we build clarity. Every single founder I work with has a story. Some were silenced like I was. Some were overlooked, underestimated, talked over. But when they work with us, they get to reclaim their narrative, visually, emotionally, strategically. I started speaking more too. After the viral keynote, the offers poured in. I said yes to the ones that felt aligned: TEDx, a National Creative Women's Summit, and most recently a spot on a Netflix docuseries about self-made female founders. Not because I needed the exposure, but because if even one woman in a dead-end kitchen job hears my story and whispers, "Maybe I could too," that's enough. That's the mission now. I live with love, not performance. Malik and I moved into a cozy craftsman house on the east side of Austin. There are plants in every window and bookshelves that touch the ceiling. We cook dinner together, real meals, with music and laughter, and no one policing my tone or questioning my choices. He tells me he's proud of me, without needing a presentation or a metric. Sometimes we sit on the porch, watching the dog chase shadows, and I think, this is what safety feels like. Not quiet to keep the peace, but quiet because there is no war. We talk about marriage, but without urgency. Love is not a goal anymore. It's a rhythm. I give back to the girl I used to be. I launched a scholarship fund for girls in creative fields who don't want to go to college, but do want to learn, grow, and build. It's called the Theo Grant, named after the only person in my bloodline who saw me without needing to reshape me. The first recipient was a 17-year-old artist whose family wanted her to be a dental hygienist. When I told her she'd been chosen, she cried so hard she couldn't speak. Later, she emailed me, "You made space for me in a world that didn't want me. I'll do the same one day." That's the legacy I care about. Not status. Access. I'm building a life I'm not trying to escape from. Every part of my life now is chosen. My friends? Chosen. My work? Chosen. My energy? Protected like sacred ground. I travel when I want, speak where I feel called, rest when I need to, without guilt. Without that voice in my head saying, "You haven't earned this yet." I have. And for the first time, I'm not surviving. I'm thriving. But most importantly, I'm free. Not the performative freedom of someone who broke the rules to prove a point. The soul deep freedom of someone who broke the cycle and built something better in its place. Something beautiful. Something quietly powerful. something my 10-year-old self would have looked at and said, "That's who I want to be when I grow up." And now, I get to look at her, the girl with paint-stained fingers and big dreams, and say, "We made it." I thought I was done, not just with the pain, with them. I had moved on, built my life, surrounded myself with people who loved me without needing to edit me. So when I opened my mailbox one Tuesday afternoon and found an envelope with my father's handwriting on it, I felt nothing at first. No rage, no grief, just a dull curiosity. The return address was still the same house, the same front porch where I used to sit with my sketch pad while my mom criticized my unstructured goals, the same hallway where I overheard them call me unstable. I almost didn't open it, but I did. Inside was a 2-page handwritten letter. Neat, precise, a little stiff, like the man himself. It started with, "Arya, I know I don't have the right to ask for much, but I hope I have the right to be honest." He said he'd watched my keynote, that he had no idea what to expect when they walked into that room, that seeing my name on the screen, followed by the silence between them, was the first time he realized how loud his absence had always been. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't defend himself. He just told the truth. "Your mother and I thought we were protecting you. We were protecting ourselves from a version of you we couldn't control." He asked not for a reunion, but for a conversation. No expectations, no manipulation. Just coffee. For the first time, he was asking, not telling. It took me 3 weeks to decide. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to check in with me, not the scared version, but the clear one. And I realized I didn't owe him access, but I owed myself clarity. So I said yes, with conditions. We met in a public cafe, neutral ground, daylight, 1 hour. When I walked in, he stood up, awkward, unsure. He looked older, softer even. We didn't hug. He asked how I'd been. I told him the truth, a condensed version. He listened, really listened. For once, he didn't interrupt, didn't correct. He said, "I want to learn how to show up differently. I know I won't always get it right." I told him, "This isn't a door swinging open. It's a window. You can see in, but you don't get to move furniture around." He nodded, didn't argue, and in that moment I felt something strange. Not reconciliation, not resolution, just recognition. He was finally seeing me, maybe not completely, maybe not forever, but clearly enough to know what he had missed. We agreed on boundaries. No calls without permission. No visits. No conversations about the past, unless I brought it up. I told him, "This only works if you follow my pace, not yours." He said he understood. And so, we keep our contact minimal, purposeful, cautious. Once in a while, he sends an article he thinks I'd like. Sometimes I reply. Sometimes I don't. We're not close, but we're not strangers either. As for my mother, she never reached out. I don't know if she ever will. And to be honest, I don't need her to. Because reconciliation isn't always repair. Sometimes it's just understanding the limits of what someone can give and choosing to stop bleeding for more. I don't hate her. I'm not waiting for her. I've stopped expecting things from people who showed me exactly who they are. That's not bitterness. It's wisdom. And if someday Reed wants to talk, I'll listen. But only if it comes without the polished smile and performative regret. I don't need apologies tied in ribbons. I need honesty tied to action. And if I never get that, I'll still be okay. Because forgiveness doesn't mean pretending nothing happened. It means making peace with the fact that it did, and choosing yourself anyway. I used to think that closure meant finally being understood, that if I could just find the right words, the right tone, the perfect mix of calm and courage, my family would suddenly say, "We get it now. We were wrong. We're proud of you." But the truth? Some people will never understand the damage they caused, because it requires them to face the version of themselves they've spent their lives denying. And that's not my job. It never was. My job is to live, to thrive, to take up space without asking first, to be the woman I needed back then. And that's exactly what I'm doing. These days, my life doesn't revolve around proving anything. I don't waste energy rehearsing conversations I'll never have. I don't replay old memories hoping they'll sting less. I don't stand outside locked doors with my hands full of explanations. Instead, I build businesses with women who were once told their ideas were unrealistic. I speak to rooms full of people whose families still won't attend their weddings. I create space for the messy middle, the part between broken and whole, where real transformation lives. And most of all, I rest. I rest in the truth that I don't need validation from the people who taught me to doubt myself. That's not confidence. That's liberation. And every now and then, I return to the neighborhood I grew up in. Not out of longing, just curiosity. To remind myself how far I've walked. One Saturday not long ago, I drove by the house I used to call home. The porch was still there, chipped paint, wind chimes clinking, the same cracked flower pot by the steps. I parked across the street. Just sat for a moment, not sad, not angry, just still. In my passenger seat was something I'd kept for years, folded, creased, traveled with me through every apartment, every launch, every city. My keynote note card. The one I held in my palm that day I stood on stage and said, "If their love has conditions, it's not love." I stepped out of the car, crossed the street, and placed it gently on the porch. No note, no explanation, just a symbol. Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. I never looked back. Because closure doesn't always need witnesses. Sometimes it's just a quiet goodbye to the place you once begged to be seen. Sometimes it's realizing you never needed to be let in, because you were always meant to build your own house. And now? That's what I've done. A life built on honesty, not obedience. Connection, not performance. Peace, not perfection. A life where the version of me they tried to silence now speaks louder than ever. Not in spite, but in purpose. And maybe you're watching this because you're somewhere in the middle of that same journey, still trying to decide if you're allowed to walk away. Still wondering if it's okay to let go of people who share your name, but not your heart. Still holding your truth like a secret, afraid it might be too much. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You are not too much. You are not a failure. You are not wrong for wanting more. You are not here to be digestible. You are here to be whole. Whatever they called you, dramatic, ungrateful, difficult, those were projections, not facts. You get to choose your path now. And if no one ever told you this before, let me be the first. I'm proud of you. For surviving, for questioning, for staying soft when the world asked you to harden. You don't need their permission. You never did. You just need your voice. So speak. And if you've ever been called a disappointment, ask yourself this: to who? Then walk away toward the life that's been waiting for you.